Hey writer, if you're ready to level up, then buckle up. Get your pen and paper ready. It's time for another episode of the Art and Business of Writing podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Art and Business of Writing podcast. I am your host, Chris Jones, and today my guest is Dwayne Ratleff. Dwayne is the author of the fiction book, Dancing to the Lyrics, Finding an Inner Rhythm. You can find it on Amazon and where other books are sold. Right now, the print copies are on Amazon, but they will be everywhere else eventually. He's working on that, but more exciting enough, Dwayne Ratleff was born in Ohio, but he grew up in Baltimore and Connecticut. As a product of the segregated Baltimore school system, he did not learn to read or write until the age of 10. After moving to Connecticut, he spent the first 2 years there as a special education student. This quickly changed and he graduated high school with honors. Dwayne opted to not pursue college, choosing instead blue-collar work as the swiftest way out of poverty, which allowed him to earn a decent standard of living without much education. Eventually, he saved enough money and relocated to San Francisco, where he lived for the next 40 years. There, he met his husband, and the two have since lived in the Palm Springs area for the last year and a half. His book is a gift from a young boy who never thought he would learn to read and write. If anyone would have told Dwayne, as a special ed student, that he would someday write a book, he would have laughed in their faces. Shortly after beginning the task of writing a book, he lost most of the use of his left hand in a tragic accident. Yet, not to be deterred, Dwayne typed the rest of the book with one finger on his right hand. Although hard at times, growing up black and gay in the 60s was a blessing, he says. I did not fit in, so I did not even try. There was no peer pressure because I did not have peers. This provided a special kind of freedom. So guys, without further ado, here's my interview with Dwayne. I think you're going to find it to be insightful. It's going to be fun. It's going to challenge you. It's going to raise your vibration for sure, as they say in Instagram circles. It's going to make you think differently about yourself. You know, your inner self, your outer self, and what the world sees you as. Dwayne's book is fantastically done, and I can't wait. So without further ado, here's the interview with Dwayne Ratleff. Hey, Dwayne, welcome to the podcast. Now, can you take a moment to expand upon your bio for us?
Yeah, growing up in different parts of the country, eventually I moved to San Francisco, and the most challenging and eventful event in my life is after being there less than 2 years, I became HIV positive. That changed my world. Not always for the bad. I mean, it was really hard. I mean, I can go on and on how horrible it was. But one of the things it gave me was a zest for life, because when they told me I was positive, they said, you will be sick in 3 years and you'll be dead in 5. And everyone who told me that was. So that changed my whole perspective on life. I really tried to live it. And then I had an accident. And then that's what led me to starting to write the book.
Wow. So with the HIV positive diagnosis, how many years ago was that? Like, what year was that?
I seroconverted in 82, so I'm coming up on 40 years, but I was diagnosed in 1991.
Wow. So they just told you, you had a year to live, basically, and here we are, 30 years later.
Almost 40.
Almost 40 years. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Wow. So, and we'll dive back in. I guess we'll talk more about those topics as we go into more of your personal life. But I'd like to unpack something you talked about in your bio, which I thought, as a writer, was so profound to me. Like, it was so crazy. Like, talk about being a special ed student. How was that identified? Like, how old were you? Who identified it? And how did we get there?
Well, I was a product of the Baltimore elementary schools, which was de facto segregation. It was a brand new building and they taught you nothing. They were taxed. So then we moved to Connecticut. So I went from one of the worst school systems in the country to the best system. And immediately it was apparent that I was like light years behind the other children. There was no compare. I could write my name. I could play chess. I could do math really well. I could spell words like cat and of, but that was about the end of it.
Wow. And how old were you at this time?
I was 9.
9 years old.
And one of the things I started to do was to actually the first thing attempted to do was to hide my, I don't want to say disability or my ignorance. I remember one of the girls in the class, she was the smartest girl in the class. And because she got to pick the words to spell and who got to spell them. So she called my name to go to the blackboard to write it out. and she didn't like me. I was hoping for the or of, something easy I could spell. She gave me hippopotamus.
Wow.
So this is when I realized I wasn't, or at the very least, I was cunning. I took the chalk, and if you hold it really tight, you press it really hard, and it made that scratching nail on the that just drives everyone crazy. So by the time I got to the first P, my teacher said, "Sit down. You're getting on my nerves with that. Sit down." So I knew I was at least cunning.
That's smart. It's funny. You ever see the movie Big Daddy with Adam Sandler?
No.
Oh man, that's one of my favorite and most funny scenes in any movie. Like, so it's like, he's adopted this boy, and his best friend is Rob Schneider in the movie, and so they're teaching the boy how to spell. He gives the boy like these softball words, really easy words to spell, and then he looks at Rob Schneider, who really he's the kind of the not so smart character in the movie, and he says, "All right, spell hippopotamus." He's like hip hop anonymous, and he couldn't say the word.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. This happened to me in like 1968.
Yeah. Oh, you have to watch that scene. Go to YouTube and just look at like the Big Daddy hippopotamus scene. It is hilarious. You'll have to watch that.
It's a shame to say, you know what? Even when someone asks me to spell it to this day, I get nervous. I've written a novel and I'm like, I get panicky.
Oh man. So what was it like being a special education student?
Actually, you know what? It was more hard being an African American student in an all white school than it was the special ed, because the attitudes they had towards African Americans at the time, that we weren't that bright. And so it was expected that I would be in there. Also, to be perfectly honest, they didn't teach me, because I'm going to be brutally honest here. I moved from East Baltimore, which is rough. Let me tell you, it's the definition of rough. So being a sissy in East Baltimore, when I moved to Connecticut, I was Wonder Woman, so they didn't mess with me.
Yeah, so I guess it's a whole different world, huh? So what was the black student population like?
It was me and my sisters and two other girls in the entire school. We had to fight our way in and out every day for 3 months.
Wow, so you go from a school system in an area that's predominantly black to one that's just predominantly white, like overnight, huh?
Yeah, one of the things that really helped me in that situation, one of the first things I noticed is how ignorant I was. And I realized I had to do something about it. Not right away, but it was a good experience because I didn't internalize. I was like, oh, I got to do something about it. Now, within 2 weeks, I realized how ignorant they were, but on different subject matters. So it was an eye-opening experience for me.
Yeah, because I remember growing up like in the mid '80s and '90s as a kid, and we used to be kind of mean to special ed students, like we call them names and just make fun of them. And of course I look back on that and I'm like, ah, man, stupid kid I was, with shame.
Yeah,
But
that's kids.
but that's being a kid, right? But what was your experience like, being a special ed student? Like, were kids typically mean to you? They pick on you? I know you talked about the girl who made you spell hard words at the blackboard, but was that kind of par for the course?
Only when you had to do something in public, because they didn't really know how you didn't know how to read unless it was that situation. The hardest part was back in the day, this was the hard part. They would actually come to the class where you were, and the special ed teacher would take you. And literally back in the day, this is before any type of legislation, the special ed class was in the boiler room. So you're already struggling with learning and it's hot as hell. You're not learning anything. We could have been shoveling coal into the furnace for all the good it did.
Wow. So when did you transition out of special ed? What grade were you in?
6th grade, and the transition was nothing that special ed did. They identified us as special ed because we were Black and from urban schools. What changed me is our 5th grade teacher decided to read Charlotte's Web. Every day for like 30 minutes, she would read that book to us. And I love that book. And it made me mad that I had to depend on her to have her read the book for me. So right after that, I just like zoomed through every learning lesson. And I went from being in special ed to by the end of 6th grade, beginning of 7th grade, I jumped ahead of the kid and I was reading the Iliad or Hamlet. So it wasn't that I was a special ed student. It's just I was a late bloomer. Once someone showed me the power of reading, I just took off.
Well, I love that. And I guarantee there's so many other children who are like that, who are like you are, who just really aren't technically special education students, but like you said, they're more late bloomers. They're more those who come up at their own pace.
Yeah, and that was definitely true for me.
Wow, that's cool. Charlotte's Web is like my wife's absolute favorite book. So,
to this day I haven't read it yet because I'm so nervous.
Yeah,
it was only read to me.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal book. Yeah, I love it too. I mean, the movie, the book. I mean, they're all so good. But yeah, it's just a great story all around. Now, like, how liberating was it for you once you grasped that? Hey, I'm like everybody else. In fact, I can keep up or even excel. Like, how liberating was that for you when you
Oh,
realized that?
it's still liberating because it's part of it, your self identification. One of the things my grandmother told me a long time ago, and I think it's true even today, you better define yourself or others will be defining you.
Mm.
So I define myself. I realize, okay, this is my situation. The institutions that are around me are geared for a certain type of person, and I'm not that person. So I had to make my own path. And, when you're young, that's kind of scary. But it just became more liberating the more I went down that path. Back in the day, they were giving out scholarships to go to school for African American students. And although I graduated with honors, I had not prepared myself. So that's when I picked up and moved to San Francisco and had a whole other type of education.
Yeah, talk about like just let's talk about that just for a second. Like I said, going from not knowing yourself very well to the point where you know yourself so well, you're an honor student. Like, what was that like once you graduated and realized, man, I'm super duper smart here. I can do anything I want to do, and I have opportunities to go to college. But now you control more of your own destiny.
Yeah, I didn't view myself as smart. I just, because I really felt that I graduated with honors because I just spit back what they wanted to hear. And I could do that really well. I'm not saying I'm not intelligent, but I knew the gig, and that was what I learned to spit it back towards them. I mean, there were some subjects that I really liked and excelled in, like history or some science, but especially English. One of the things that I will touch on is being in special ed actually made me afraid of my writing. So if someone had told me back when I was in special ed that you were going to write a novel, I would have laughed in their face because I just felt uncomfortable with my writing.
And so how'd you break that up? Like, how did you become more comfortable as a writer?
It was so funny. I did it actually. I just said, I'm going to write this. And a funny story is I met my partner online and we were typing, we were getting to know each other. And I was so nervous about my writing and that he actually typed back to me. He says, "Oh, is English your second language?" It was that bad. Seriously, it really was. But then when I started writing my book, what I realized I had jobs that didn't require writing. After I started writing and really started doing it, I realized, okay, these are the rules. These are the rules I want to break. These are the rules I really don't care about. And so I just went for it. I just went for it.
Oh, what? That's a great story. The second language. Wow.
Yeah, it's still a kind of a joke. Dwayne, is this your second language?
Oh man, you're full of great stories. So let's talk about the other side of your life. I guess not the other side of your life, but the other side of the story that I want to talk about is understand that you were gay. Like, when did you know?
Oh, very early on. I didn't know the term. I
Yeah.
wasn't an effeminate kid. My thing was I was really kind of confident in some ways. Like I was really bad at baseball and still don't like it. So when the boys would play baseball, I would go play with the girls' dolls or whatever. So I was one of these kids who kind of went with what he wanted to do. Homosexuality came later on. That's when the attraction came for men. But people don't get this. When you're a gay child, there's certain things that come with gay children that you do. It's not gender confusion. It's just I thought everyone else was gender confused because if I wanted to play with dolls, I wanted to play with dolls. And if I wanted to play football, I could switch from being playing with dolls to playing football rough. I could do that. I mean, so I thought everyone else was confused.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, I said,
Yeah.
why? Like, I remember when we played swords or whatever, I said, why do girls always have to be nurse and boys be the warriors? I mean, I just didn't get it. And I just didn't buy into it, especially in the African American community where hyper masculinity is really kind of exaggerated. I took that and rejected it fully. I wanted to be the man I wanted to be, not some trumped up whatever. It's like I wanted to be who I wanted to be.
Yeah, and that's an important point you bring up. I mean, growing up, that's what I experienced too. Just that the hyper masculinity and being around black males growing up. Dads, uncles, all that, and then you see that you know it's cool that you get to make the choice. Like you can say, look, I don't want to be that. I want to be who I want to be. And I like that you identified that and said, I'm just going to be Dwayne. That's just what it's going to be about.
And also, it helped that, some of the men in my family were actually quite supportive, but my grandmother was the most supportive. And she says something that, to this day, that I always use. She said, Dwayne, don't explain yourself, be yourself.
Ooh, I love that.
It's like, I don't owe you an explanation. It's who I am. The thing that was interesting about the book, even though it's a narrow focus about being Black and gay, it's actually about being who you are.
Yeah. So I guess for you, when did you come out? When did you say, hey, this is who I am?
This is funny. My grandfather was taking me to the airport.
Yeah.
And I was going to San Francisco. This is the first person. And he goes, boy, why are you going to San Francisco? I said, Grandpa, I ain't never lied to you, and I ain't going to lie to you now. I said, I'm going there to sleep with men. He said, oh, okay. He said, boy, because I love you. And this is what he said to me. This is an old Black man from that period. He said to me, Dwayne, he said, make sure when you go home with a man, don't never go home with a man you can't best in a fight just in case he's not gay, because I don't want you to get hurt.
That's some solid advice.
So, but going to San Francisco was just an easy time. It became a lifestyle there. But even there, in the gay bars there was discrimination against people of color. And, there were some gay Black bars, but, not a lot. So there was that. I mean, that's just part of the whole fabric of our society. Coming out was not difficult for me. It really wasn't. I mean, I had a year of it where, I certainly didn't want anybody to know I was gay in high school. And fortunately for me, I went to a high school where I really wasn't that attracted to a lot of the guys, so it wasn't a big problem.
Right.
Because that can become an issue. It's like when you realize, oh, I'm attracted to these. Yeah, the whole process, I think everyone has a different one. Like generally for the African American community, a lot of people are rejected. I didn't have that problem. They were pretty accepting for me for several reasons. I was really a strong personality. Also, I had the goods on everybody else in my family. So if they started talking smack to me, I could really, put all their business on Front Street. So even if they didn't feel comfortable, they didn't antagonize me.
Right. That's something you said in your bio that I really liked. It says, I did not fit in, so I didn't even try. There was no peer pressure because I did not have any peers. This provided a special kind of freedom. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. I mean, like all the stuff I saw on TV, the white picket fence, the 2-point kids, how to act. And, it really was freeing because later on in life, I ran into these people who really outwardly looked like they conformed to this. And then going to San Francisco, and I heard all these stories of how they struggled to conform. And I didn't do that. So that really was, I didn't go through the angst of like, straightening my hair or having my nose done. Those are just physical characteristic. Or affect my speech. I mean, I still can have a dialect if I want to. So I didn't really, no. I just didn't care enough what other people thought about me to change myself. And that's not coming from an arrogant point of view. It's, something my grandmother used to say, and it's really true. Your emotions are my enemy. What you want from me, I can't give. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, dude, it makes perfect sense. I completely get that, man. You're a wise grandma.
Oh, she was really good. One of my favorite things that she did, and this is in the book, if people want to borrow money from you, this is the best line ever. I remember I wanted to borrow some money from her, and she said, so baby, what you're telling me is you've mismanaged your money. Now you want to mismanage my money.
Oh man. Dude, I tell you, we could sit on this entire podcast and tell Black grandma stories all day.
Oh, you should do one.
How much time you got? Oh man, no, my grandmother was the same way, man. She just always had these zingers and these things and these sayings that she would say to me all the time. And it's funny, my grandmother passed in 2012. She had pancreatic cancer, but man, yeah, so many of her lessons just kind of they stuck with me my entire life, even to now. Like I sit back and I'm like, man. I think the biggest thing with her, my grandmother, was always her work ethic. That's what stuck with me the most. She just had this undying work ethic. So when I get tired, I start thinking about her. I'm like, she never tired. Why am I getting tired now?
Well, my grandma was the same way because I never And I've had many jobs. I've never had somebody work me as hard as my grandmother.
No.
Oh, no, absolutely. And the thing is, they really are good for keeping you grounded. I remember during the disco era, I put on like bell bottoms and these flowery shirts, and I was fighting my colors. Ooh, not matching or at all, nothing. I had a nerve to go up to my grandmother and go, Grandma, how do I look? She said, Baby, if your intentions was to look like a clown, you succeeded. And then she said something to me that I'll never forget. She said, Baby, don't ever go fishing for compliments in the Dead Sea. I ain't got nothing for you.
Oh, man.
So I had to be. So nobody was as That's the thing that's really good about grandmothers. I ever ran into in life was smarter than my grandmother. So I just kind of like, well, whatever.
Right, right. So let's take us in the modern era. So has the modern era brought a lot more acceptance for you, you think, and expanded like your
Oh
circle
yeah,
of friendships and given you more opportunities?
yeah. I mean, in some ways, I fit in with the younger kids because with all the transgender and stuff, I was like not transgender, but I was all of that before it became mainstream. So the younger kids are kind of fascinated that there was somebody like back in that era who was like that. I never had problems with friends. I mean, the only problem that I have, and this is gay and black, is trouble with I'm always nervous of the justice system because things have changed so much for us as black people and even myself as a gay person. I don't feel a lot of personal obstacles. But when it comes to the justice system, I do feel for black people, it's still like 1851 with the Dred Scott decision, like there's no rights the police have to respect for us. That has not changed. Everything else for me has changed.
So let's talk about your book. Let's dive into the book.
Okay.
Tell us about dancing to the lyrics. Let's kind of tie everything together because I feel like the book really is going to pull this entire thing together for us.
Well, so one of the things people they ask, well, why did you write the book? And as I just told you, people would always say, oh, did you have a hard time growing up gay? And the book will attest to, yes, it was that. But the book encompasses a historical view of Baltimore in 1968. I lived between a penitentiary and a junkyard. You know, the book is listed as fiction because, people in my family told me, oh, you need to change the names to protect the guilty, not the innocent, because they ain't none. So the book is islands of memory connected by fictitious bridges because it only spans about a 5-year period when I'm really young. But more than anything, the first part deals with what it was like going from a rural town to Baltimore in the 60s, which was really, really rough. All the things about that. The last third of the book actually is important to me because even in today's news, you see what happens in the inner city, but no one ever sees it from the point of view of a child. One of the things that I've written to a publisher that I was talking to is the funny thing is sometimes the people who see the most are never on the evening news. That was me, and it's probably you and a lot of other people. This is the voice that wasn't on the evening news. Like, what was it like when Martin Luther King was killed, which is tomorrow, is the anniversary of it. Well, by chance, it happened to be my mother's birthday. And she was actually blowing out the cake when we got the news that Martin Luther King was killed. And I actually thought, oh my God, she blew out his life. It was just such a weird juxtaposition. But then what it was like, and excuse me, let me go back. The irony of that day was America had killed its youngest Nobel Prize winner that day. That same day, America launched its highest rocket into outer space that day, which most people forget. And for me, it was really important to describe what it was like for me to see when thousands of white soldiers pour into your city. You'd hardly have ever seen white people, what your reaction was to that. And then it comes to the most important aspect of my book, which is the chapter entitled Addicted to Supremacy. Even though this happened in 1968, it relates to what's going on today. Americans, particularly white Americans, are addicted to supremacy. It is a 400-year addiction, and we are going through the withdrawals. That is what's happening. I compare a matter of fact, in the book, I actually compared the withdrawal to that of heroin. And the most important thing about that chapter is that's when I realized, even though I was only 9 years old, the racial makeup and what makes people tick. It was an incident that even happened 20 years before that, but it's probably for me the most important chapter in the book because although it happened in 1968, it explains a lot of what's going on now. The other thing that I really wanted to point out about the book is like culture, culture clashes. The book ends, and it's a good thing that they have this thing up called, I'll call It Gets Better for Gay People Who Are Committing Suicide. My book ends on a note of it gets better. But the most important part of the book for me is the duality of who we are. We're multiple things. We're this, I was Baptist, I'm American, I'm African American, I'm gay, and we use these all the time in our everyday life. So I kind of want to, this is a quick story. When I first moved to Connecticut, my sister finally were able to get a doll. I mean, it was a knockoff doll. I mean, it was not really a Barbie. It didn't come with, Barbie Dream House. It came with Section 8 housing. I mean, it's total ghetto doll. I'm sitting on the porch, teasing the hair, giving her a fabulous hairdo. And these two white kids come up to me and call me, faggot and sissy. And I put the doll gently down because I didn't want to mess up that fabulous hair I just gave her. And I started beating the crap out of them. So it's really weird. Like all of a sudden now I'm the neighborhood sissy and the bully. So that was an example of the inner city black kid protecting the gay kid. Okay, fast forward 20 years, I'm in San Francisco. I live in a neighborhood that's drug infested and prostitutes. We're going to raise money for an AIDS organization. And I was walking by and my friend drove by in a car and she gave me a really expensive Art Deco purse to sell. So she drove off and I said, oh, she's really forgetful. So I started rooting in the bottom of the purse and to see if she left her money or license in there. And all of a sudden I look up and two cops are coming toward me. I go, oh my God, I'm black, I'm wearing a hoodie and I have a purse. What am I going to do? So no thug would do this. I slung a purse over my shoulders and flounced out the street like it was mine, and they left me alone. Now, thing about this is what we all do, all of it. Not that particular thing. It's called code switching. The younger people have a name for it. I didn't know that name. But my book is really about how we use all our personalities and our identities to survive in a good world. And I don't even want to say survive, thrive. We need to thrive. And this is really what my book is about.
That's phenomenal. That last story is amazing. That's pretty resourceful.
Oh, because right then and there with the cop, it was better to be gay.
Right.
And then with the kids, it was better to be the black thug from Baltimore. So that's my personal dealings. You have it too. We all have little things that we tap into all the time. And that's an oversimplification, but I think my book is a good example of doing that well.
And so let me ask you a question then, because I think this is kind of fascinating because I like the whole psychological aspect of it. Like, do you feel like external labels hurt us more than help us? Like external labels is those labels that are put on by others.
I don't let people do that to me. See, I look at myself as a Post-it note. I put them on and take them off as I need them. You don't have anything to do with it. If I decide I'm a thuggish black person, that's what you have to deal with. If I'm the queenie black person, that's what you have to do with today. If I'm the angry black male, that's what you have to deal with. The problem I have is when other people label us. I can label myself anything I want. You can't do that.
Right. That's exactly what I'm referring to. Do you feel like they're a detriment to society that people just want to label you all the time? I'm going to put you in this category, in this category, in this category.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. Here's my point. Whenever you have the power to do, don't let them.
Right.
Don't let them. I mean, I remember one time, this is really funny. This is not in the book. There was this guy and my sister finally got a Pocahontas dress and I'm wearing it. This is in Connecticut and this white boy comes around and starts teasing me. He said, I'm going to, tell everybody you were wearing a dress. And not that I'm a violent person, but all of a sudden, I'm having him on the ground punching him and saying, and if you say anything, I'm going to tell everybody that you got beat up by a guy in a dress. So people will try to label you. I throw it back up in their face.
Oh, that's phenomenal. I love that.
And this is very key. It is okay for me to label myself. I give myself permission. You don't have it. or I don't mean you per se, but anyone. It's like,
Right.
no. And part of the thing that for me, and I want people to see me for who I am, because this is not my quote, but it was one of the best ones I've ever heard. It's like, you're born an original. Why die a copy?
Yes.
It's no, because, and sounds arrogant, but it's not. I'm not here to please anyone. I am not, I want people to like me. But I'm not here to please you. I mean, sometimes I've seen people who are so intent on pleasing other people, and this may be a broad stereotype, but sometimes they seem like the unhappiest people.
Mm-hmm.
When you try to please someone who can't be pleased.
Right. Or people that at the end of the day, do I really care what they think? Does
Yeah, I mean, some
their
people I
opinion
care
really
what I
matter?
think. I mean, like my grandmother, I cared, but a lot of people I just don't. And it's not like I don't give a F. It's not
Yeah.
that. You just, I want people who can be the wind in my sails, not an anchor at my bow or stuff.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. It's like, the people that have who've earned a right to speak into my life, I'll appreciate them and we'll talk. But it's like, if you haven't earned that right, then,
And
your
also, one of
opinion
the things I
doesn't
think
matter.
mainstream society needs to learn, and this is in regards with labels, some labels are not meant for you at all. In other words, if I decide, because I'm a different way with my friends, because I've had some people, I'll be in a group and a friend will get familiar with me and a stranger will try to do the same thing. And I'm saying, no, 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 no. This is a public space, but this is personal between me and you're not welcome. Because one of the things I found in life, the most dangerous thing you could do, particularly as an African American, but as any person, is tell people the truth. The truth really messes with people. When you actually tell someone what you really think, and not to be mean, just to tell them, you're just not that important.
Yes.
Something my grandmother used to say, and I think it's really true about most people. She said, most people think they're the center of the universe for no good reason.
Wow. Yes. That's the truth. There's no lies detected in that one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes the truth just so throws people back.
Well, I think it does too. I think it does too.
I mean, one time we were in this restaurant in Texas, and I was eating at a restaurant, and these two people came in. They said, well, how's the chicken steak? How's this? And my husband's really polite. He gives a thumbs up. It's really good. And the waitress says, well, what do you think of the chicken fried steak? And without even thinking, I wasn't being mean. I said, if you scrape the nasty batter off, it's not too bad. The look on her face, it's like I had Tourette's or a stroke. It just came out. I wasn't being mean.
Right.
So telling people the truth is a really big thing. And that's one of the things about my book that does it tells the truth of what it was like to grow up in an abusive family, how I saw myself in, a heterosexual America, a white America, and how I adapted to it. But the bigger picture that I was really surprised, and I probably would want to end on this note, is that the younger people who've read this, and this is really important for me, who've read it, who've had bad childhoods, one of the things they've gotten from this is they said, my childhood was so bad that I was throwing everything out, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. She said, several of the people have said, and one psychiatrist said, the thing I liked about your book, it helped me reclaim my childhood. Oh, not everything was bad in my childhood. It was so bad, they actually went back to their childhood and retrieved the good things from it. Because parts of my book are really funny because when my sisters and I interacted, we had a wonderful time. Some of the adults were really not so good. But so it's really a good book to tell you don't throw away your whole childhood because a lot of it was bad, because you need the good parts from it.
Right. And this book fits anybody, right? This is for any person, right?
Yeah, that was the thing that was surprising for me. It was such a narrow thing, black, gay, 1968 Baltimore, but the lessons of it were like, oh my God, it reached people that I had not expected at all. Not at all. I had no clue that it would be this well received and that people really felt it was insightful. Because the title, and I must get to the title, I shouldn't tell you, the reason I did Dancing to the Lyrics are two reasons. One, I won't tell because it's in the book. But the other reason I named it to that is I was just that different. I didn't dance to the rhythm. It was lyrics. We all danced to something else. And I was odd in that sense. It's to bring out the oddity.
Mm-hmm.
I am the other that is you. Because one of the things I wanted to do in the book as an African American writer and a gay writer, a lot of times we write as the other, as the outsider. I don't do that in my book. My family's been here since 1670, a rarity for, that Black people can know that. I'm a very important part of the family. I watched I Love Lucy. I experienced all of that stuff. And I have my own take on it.
So as an author, like as someone who's just written a book, what was the effect of that book on you personally? Like once you got all that up out of your system onto paper into the eye of the public, how did it change you?
It made me realize I want to bring more creativity into my life. I was just really surprised that it was that well received that, and to say, oh, I'm an author. There's this conflicting person in me, the boy standing before the blackboard trying to spell hippopotamus, and the man who's written this pretty good novel. So it's certainly diminished the boy who stood in front of the board and tried to spell hippopotamus. So it's expanded my world beyond belief. And it was also really good is at this time, and this is really important, a friend of mine who, when I first met her, I was like 30 and she was like 9. And she wrote a book. I read her book and she read mine. And we both said, it's so nice to finally meet you. Because this book, although I have it listed as fiction, what, where, and how it happened is true. Who and why may not be. But the facts, that's why I listed as fiction. So it brought out a lot of pain for me. It's like, I feel like I'm not hiding anything because I put my all in it. So there's nothing else to tell, at least from that period in my life. It was liberating. It was truly, truly liberating.
So what's next for you?
Right now, the part of it is the promoting part of the book. The next book I actually don't want to do a book about me. I want to do a book about a Victorian, a fictitious book about a Victorian and the different people who live in it in different periods of time in San Francisco. That's my next project.
Ooh, I'm looking forward to that. That sounds good.
Yeah, this will be easier because it will be all fiction, so I can go anywhere I wanted. It's just surprising, that I was able to write this. Plus, one of the good things, since I had a hand injury, part of my hand was severed off, so I lost the use of my left hand. It was a really bad accident. The good thing about that was it slowed me down. I had to type with one finger. So the entire book was typed with one finger. The good thing about that, it gave me the time. I don't want to say I wrote the book as so much I untangled it from my mind.
That's a pretty cool analogy there. Kind of pretty cool metaphor there.
Yeah, it's, so it's really interesting. The funny thing is now people are looking at me very differently that I've written the book. I could be funny, I could be entertaining. People are actually taking me more serious.
Yeah, a book will do that for you. Absolutely. Especially once people dig in, because when you write a book that's got like yours has a bunch of nonfiction components to it that come out of your life, like people start to identify with that. Like they realize there's a human being behind this. There's a like a person just like me behind all this.
And it was so funny so a lot of my friends who from the white high school that I went to, one of the things they said, they always said that how nothing bothered you in school. I said, after reading this book, they said, now we see why nothing bothered you. Connecticut had nothing. And I even told them this. Connecticut was a place you turned on the news and watched it on TV. Baltimore was a place news happened to you.
Yeah. No, that's the truth. It's like definitely like night and day. It's like going from, the streets to summer camp almost.
Yeah. So it was so funny that, I brought ghetto to Connecticut in a way they were not prepared for. I know that sounds funny, but it's true.
Right. Oh man. Well, I've appreciated having you as a guest, Dwayne. Just your life is amazing. The book sounds phenomenal. Where can people find the book?
Actually, it's pretty much everywhere now except for Google. I have it on Amazon in electronic and print. I have it Barnes and Noble and other places like that. They're only in ebook form because I'm still trying to figure out how I want to do things with bookstores. So I haven't quite put it in print. So it's in ebook form everywhere and in print form only on Amazon. But that will change in another week. So any other place you go to, and you look for Dancing to the Lyrics, it will come up. And I will say this, and it's not a selling point. You want to sell your book, but I also want to. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm a fast reader. I'll read through this really quickly." The one thing that was a surprise for my book is it's not a fast read.
No?
No, it's not. That doesn't mean it's not good. It's just it's really intense, so you just can't speed through it.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. I've read books that way, where you read it, you ingest them, you think about them, they impact you a little bit, and then you move on to the next chapter, the next section.
And also for me, it's just I want the gay Black experience out there. You're starting to see more of it, but I want to see the situation where someone who dealt well with it, didn't internalize the hate, because I didn't. I never did. I mean, part of it was, it's like, for me personally, I knew that the world was against me. I certainly wasn't going to join in and beat myself up too.
No, and that's a great way to kind of come in for a landing. I appreciate all that you shared on the show. I appreciate just how you stuck to yourself and your truth and who you are from the time you were young all the way up until now, which is an important thing to do, given that we live in a world that's so influenced by what people think, or different movements or different waves of life. But you've been Dwayne all the way through.
Yeah, and I hope that this helps people out there, younger people who are, trying to form their identity. I really hope it does help those people.
I do too, and we'll definitely include your link to your books in the show notes, where to access information about you. And I wish you the best in all your writing endeavors and promoting your book, Dwayne.
Okay, thank you, and you have a great day. Okay.
I absolutely will. You too.
How's that for inspiring? I hope you take action on one thing you learned in today's episode. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast and left a review on iTunes, I want to encourage you to do that too. Finally, be sure to visit chrisjonesinc.com to sign up for updates. Don't worry, I won't spam you. And we'll see you back here next week for another episode.